or I get seeing where am I in terms of spirit and intent with that. If I find out I'm a mistrusting person, I have a lot of mistrust, well, then what happens if I go work on that? Because very often we work on symptoms. There's something wrong with me in relationships. I cannot be intimate. I just can't take risk. I got to learn to be a risk taker. But can I be a risk taker if I don't create back within myself a sense of trust? So if I work on a trust, will the risk-taking ability change without me working on it? So I'm working on the right stuff. So you can, listen, I don't know what I don't know. You can work on the wrong stuff and be working on the symptom and it won't ever change. It's just really a struggle. Now the neat thing about the human being is, if we have missed something in this developmental process, we have the ability to go back and put it back inside of ourselves. See, to be restored to sanity. So we have the ability, if we have missed something, so most of this that we're going through in these developmental stages is to kind of get from I don't know what I don't know to now I know what I don't know. So once I know these things, as I start to work those steps, then see, I should be able to really accelerate my growth and really grow at a very sound path if I know how the Great Spirit made us and I work in harmony with getting me back to that system He made and not invent it. Now let's just say that you have a little baby, say 18 months old, has developed a sense of trust. In other words, they have this feeling, and we've seen some of them, the world is a good place and man, I belong in it. And then they start walking. Now the adults will call that next stage autonomy, or it also means a sense of independence. So a 2-year-old, when they can start walking, it takes 3 adults full time, see, working in shifts just to hang with them. See, because they get up there, you start setting them on the ground and their feet are going like this, they're just waiting for you to let them hit the ground, and they're off. And they're into everything. I mean, they're just into the dirt and they're tasting this and taking toast and dumping it in the milk and reaching in and squeezing it and making messes, see? Now, what's the 2 most favorite words of a 2-year-old? No. Now, at that developmental stage, that 2-year-old it has to develop a sense of independence. So they try to break away from mom and dad. I am my own person now. You want to do this? No. Well, let me butter this. I'll do it myself. You need this? No. No. See, and a 2-year-old would be a perfect juvenile if they could just drive a car. Right? They just tearing everything up. Now, you'll see very often, like, say, 2 daughters come over to mom's place. Each has a 2-year-old. And one of the moms will come over and they take their 2-year-old and they sit him on the chair. And she just sits there, so perfect and so proper. The other sister brings her kid over, and I'm telling you, that little boy just tears Grandma's place up. He's into everything, the pots and the pans and exploring and doing all this stuff. And they say to that person, why isn't that one like that good little girl? That good little girl may very well be the one that's not developing mentally healthy. You see, because you're supposed to develop that sense of trust, that sense of that freedom. Because it's at that stage where you start to learn to make choices and decisions. I'll do it myself, thank you. So when you see those little 2-year-olds doing that, you see, when you see them making a choice or a decision, like they draw this weird thing or whatever and they show it to you, ooh, I like how you decided that. You're something. You're good at it. And you see them, you know, they walk around, nose up in the air, ooh, I'm good at it. So at that stage, you see, you're supposed to develop that sense of independence. Because if you don't develop that sense, it's a feeling, a sense of being independent, then what will you see later on? Can't make decisions, indecisive, see, wishy-washy, not taking risk, afraid of this, afraid of that. Does that make sense? So when we start to develop ourselves and go through the steps, if we start to come back and take a look at this developmental cycle as we work the steps, and I see I'm having trouble with choice and decisions, I'm having a hard time in relationships, and I can ask myself, do I have this feeling of independence? If not, then maybe I need to go back and do something to bring it back inside of myself so I can have that stage, because that's how the Creator made me. He says, one thing to grow up in my world that I created to be mentally healthy is you must develop a sense of trust. That you belong in this world. It's a natural state for you. You see, and you love being here. And not only that, you function from choice and decision. See, you have that ability to do that. On what? Well, that's really handled in a step. Like you see, where is it you function from trust? At the level of spirit and intent. Trust in that sense is a decision. If you trust someone too much, that's not trust. Right? That is a different issue than trust. And that's some kind of a fear. We'll get into some of that. Could we just ask that one just a little bit later? Because there's more information that will really help. It's like you cannot... Trust is not a volume. Trust is a decision. So you cannot trust too much. That's called some other things. But not trust. Any other questions or comments on this? Then next stage you go through is a stage called initiative. And this happens about ages, or maybe 4 to 7. Now you see little kids, what you'll see them is, all of a sudden they just go from tearing everything up, all of a sudden you see them, they become really pretending type. They have like imaginary friends, pet turtles, and they make you set places for them at the supper table. Sit here in front of a friend and they talk to them just like they're real. And then you'll see them, they do all sorts of weird things. You know, one day they'll have a pan on their head and they pretend to be a policeman. Then the next day they're like a cop. Then the next day they're cowboys and they want all this stuff on them. See, well, it's at that stage they are developing, and so they're saying, I wonder what it's like to be a policeman. See, so they put a pan on their head and they run around blowing sirens and doing that stuff. And the next day, I wonder what it's like to be a cow person, you know, a cowboy. So they start shooting like this, so you do all that stuff, and you'll see them sometimes, they'll come up like on their, they'll pretend like they're a dog. See, they'll come up, woof, 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 and bow, wow, bow, wow. And they'll grab your pant leg like that, and they'll sit up and bark like that, and you reach up there, get a cookie, see, make them speak, see, and you give them that cookie, pat them on the head, see, kick them in the, see, and help. Now it's okay, see, if you're 3, 4, and 5 doing that, but if you got a teenager that's doing that, like barking like a dog, you're really in trouble. You got a sick kid. See? It's really bad, right? So it's at that stage where they are developing now imagination, the ability to vision, creativity skills. So they're developing that. Then you'll see this young person will grow, and they'll come to that next stage of development called industry, or another word for it is sense of accomplishment. So at that stage, these are those pre-teenage years, there's 2 feelings that the human being needs to have. One feeling is, I'm good at something feelings, I'm good for something feelings. We need to have that feeling, I'm good at it. Now you'll see, like culturally, we knew who we were. You say, why am I, who am I, where am I going? We always knew. Well, you know him, he's a hunter. You know her, she's the... And that feedback was always to give us that feeling of being good for something, good at something. You see, a lot of teachers are pretty good at it in schools. They have little badges and little happy faces, you know. You go up there, you get your test, you go, ooh, look, you get a blue happy face, see? Man, you're something. See, I'm good at it. So you get those I'm good at it feelings. Or you'll see boys clubs or some of our drum groups. You know, what they're doing is they're giving those youth those feelings, I'm good at it, I'm good for something feelings. But you see, what happens if you don't develop those feelings? It's a polarity system, so I will develop then, I'm not good for nothing feelings. I'm not good at anything feelings.
What age would that be?
8 to 12. That's the pre-teenage years. So if you develop at that age, I'm good for nothing, I'm not good at anything feelings, then later on you'll see behavior. Hey, why don't you go try this? Oh, not me. but I think you can draw. You can. No, I wouldn't be good at it. And you see in body language, they're just not good at anything. You know, those type of feelings. And you'll just see a resistance and can't make decisions and just real withdrawal, type of thing. So it's at that age it's very, very important, you see, to develop within the human those two feelings. Now let's say I get in recovery and I can examine through the set of steps that I don't have those feelings. The neat thing about the human being is I have the ability to come back and develop them. I need to have those to grow mentally healthy. Now you take a look at how many of us have been raised in dysfunctional families. How many of us have been raised by alcoholic parents like me? How many of us has many of our relatives drinking? How many of us have been told? I mean, did somebody, like when we were growing, did we develop a sense of trust? Or did we have good choices and decisions, right? 2-year-olds, you see, where you're supposed to be going, no, oh yes, you will. Shame on you. Bad girl, bad boy, smack, see, slam, kick. Then all of a sudden you don't develop those feelings. That's normal. You start to grow up acting a certain way. There must be something wrong with me. Then you start into some of the violence and some of the sexual abuse and some of the other things many of us have experienced. So we start to grow up with no sense of trust, no sense of independence. I am good for nothing. You're good at nothing. Even the input from schools and all these different things. So we start to grow up as Native people, growing in dysfunctional families, not having these feelings which the Creator designed for the human being to have. Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah. See. Absolutely. But even for us, as Native people, alcohol is but a symptom. There's other things that we have to work on. But I think you see a lot of that in our kids. Ourselves grew up that way, many of us. That's the way it was. Now, we just grew up thinking that was normal. I didn't know there was another way. Right? It's like my dad would go drinking or whatever. Well, we knew, his patterns really well. And we heard when he'd come back to the res. We always had like a lot of old cars and stuff out in our backyard. So we'd hide food in there. So when he comes out the back window, we'd go back to where that food was. We had stuff stashed. Hoping he wouldn't come find us. And but we weren't the only ones. A lot of people did that. That was just the way you did it. It was now it was a survival thing. But you see, it's just like myself. When I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional family, and when I was in this age here, from age since where I'm supposed to be developing a sense of industry or accomplishment, from a time I was a little before I was 10 years old to a little after I was about 11 and a half, I was sexually molested by an uncle, minimum weekly. So it was also one of the favorite uncles, come from a large family. And that went on all the time. Then one time he went to the res, to a party there, and somebody shot him 6 times. They got a big fight. I was so happy when that happened. But then when I saw how my mom and everybody acted, they were all sad. I had the wrong feeling there. I was glad this son of a bitch got it. See, is how I thought. And I never ever told anybody that, ever, till I was 33. But then you would see me in relationships. Relationship after relationship after relationship. I built these walls. You see, and I just couldn't let anybody through. And God, I wanted to. Or sometimes you'd see a woman, that would have that insight to get through those walls. I was always given signals, see. Come on. Back. Come on. Back. And they would say things like, You never let anybody close to you. You oughta. I couldn't do it. It was just a paralysis. So I do. I just go drink some more. See? So I just go through them, but I could never get a relationship and keep it. I couldn't even tell you how I felt. I didn't recognize feelings. I was 30-some years old. It actually wasn't. In a certain case, about 2 months ago, I was telling Deborah, when you feel like this, what is that called? I'm still discovering them. Before that, I went through a thing where I went through a set of steps and everything. I had a whole bunch of them crop up. I didn't know what that name of that was. I never had that. I had to run around trying to find out what is the name of this thing. When you feel like this, when this thing is there, what is it? I didn't know that. But you see, the law is, it doesn't take account whether you are a child or not. It doesn't take account for that. It takes account for whether you live in harmony with it or not. If you are raised out of harmony with it, then your style of life is going to be a certain way. The only catcher is, the human being can change, and I as a human being, it doesn't matter who did what to me. Bottom line, see, it's just like, what did I really want this relationship with my uncle? After he died and after I started, try to get free of it? What I really wanted is I wanted him to come back to life. Just give me a day with him. That would have done it. Then he could have died and I could have went on, died again. I could have went back and forgiven him. But he didn't come back. So I spent this time, you see, what's wrong with me? I must have done something wrong and dwelled in that forever. See, it really was impactful. Even though I kept it hid, it touched every area of my life. There was no area of my life wasn't touched. Job, relationships with children, relationships, every place was because of that issue, but I couldn't bring that up. So I hung on to it. But then you would take a look at me. My sister used to call me on guard. She said it in our language, but it meant on guard. See, I could never sit with my back to the wall. Now, I always knew where the doors were. See, even at the supper table we'd eat, I couldn't sit in the middle because we had a large family, like a table. I could never sit in the middle. I had to sit on the end. I couldn't do it. See, and I just eat, never said nothing. Always watching. See? And a lot of those things you see that's happened, like your dad will come up and say, I'm going to ask you the truth. I'm going to ask you one time, tell me the truth. You tell him the truth, bam, right across the room. So pretty soon you learn, you're going to get it anyway, just say nothing. Right? Don't say nothing. So see, then you start to grow up that way, and then you become very silent. So then, now do you not say nothing to him? You take no risk. You tell nobody nothing, unless you want them to know it. Or you might tell them something, you see, to use or to manipulate. Or you don't tell them anything. Because if you do, you see, you're going to get it. Does that make sense? Now, you just take, once we come to the stage of identity, and these are the teenage years. See, at the stage of identity, this is a very, very critical stage for the human being. This is the first time in the life that a human being will consciously seek the answer to those three questions. Teenagers do. Why am I? Who am I? And where am I going? And that's why you see them doing all those weird things. Geez, one day their hair is green and they wear these kind of suits, and a week later they're dressed like this, they like this kind of music. So at that identity stage, the human being must have this feeling, the feeling of belonging. It has to belong. It's a feeling that it seeks. So you'll see them clusters, they get little groups. Right? They find out mom and dad, what kind of music do you like? Country and western. They like rap. See, you're out. See, we're in. So they start to develop, you see, this identity. And you see them doing a lot of weird stuff from an adult's point of view. They're just really weird. But they're seeking out, that's why gangs are so effective. See, in our culture, it wasn't that difficult to get an identity because we hunted, we fished, we cured, we tanned, we did all these things. But you take these modern times, tell you don't need to hunt, you don't need to cook. See, when are you one? Well, when I get my driver's license. Geez, I can't wait. 16, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And then what's next? Well, drinking, to 18. Well, I can't wait to get there so I can be one. So we end up without identity, with a heart. See, that's why gangs work so well. if you think about it. It's very hard to be somebody. You take native people, come into a big urban society. If we don't have, good like drum groups and powwows and that kind of stuff where people can start to develop that, gangs always fill that need of belonging. You know him, his the Lord. You know her, she's the. You see? So gangs are very, very effective. Now what will happen, say as we grow up and we don't get an identity, later on, maybe in the late 30s, you will see very funny behavior among, like men, for example. You'll see a lot of alcoholism, suicide, a lot of depression. You'll see a lot of them will dump their wives about that age, and they go back and they try to find one 17, 18, 19, see, 20. Real young ones. And you'll see them, they'll even dress funny. They'll like roll their cigarettes up in their T-shirts again, you know how they used to do, Lucky Strikes or whatever. They roll them up in there, and they're dressed in green hats and purple pants and pink socks, and you see them coming to a party. Smack open the door, run to the middle of the living room, jump up on top of the coffee table, and they make the announcement, "I'm here, the party can begin." See, the kid's here. See, acting like a teenager, trying to recreate the past. And so we'll see that type of behavior happen later on. Then we get out of that stage of identity, like in the late, maybe 19, 20 years old, if we're growing up normally. So it's at that stage we're supposed to be searching, trying new things, finding the answer to those three questions. Who am I? Why am I? And where am I going? So once you get, yes? Same way. You'll see a lot of different behaviors in women also doing that.
Yes, one of the things you touched on that was real important to me about my recovery is like all the time I was sedated, I was, like I'm catching up, and like somebody, I'm criticized sometimes because they might say that I'm having like pre-adolescent, childlike, or adolescent behavior, so that's natural for me because I know where I'm coming from. But one of the things that you don't hear a whole lot of dialogue about is men trying to catch up emotionally, let alone women. And a lot of the times when I see it, you might hear somebody share at a meeting that you might have known for a long time, and they're starting to identify it because we're able to read between the lines a little bit. But it's not talked about openly.
Oh, no.
I've heard very few women talk about trying to catch up. Like for me, like I was a stone-cold alcoholic when I was 15, and like now, probably, maybe I was about 19 or 20. And one of the things that's been exciting for me is because I was sedated, like during those real important years, like when you date, it means a lot to me now. Like it's even, like basically just holding hands, something like that, it means a lot to me, whereas I see a lot of other people, young or old or adult, take it for granted. And see, with me and my development, I don't take anything for granted anymore. It means a lot to me. But like I said, you don't hear a whole lot of dialogue. And I think it's real important that we as men and women should start talking about it, start getting into it. And I don't know, I'm just excited for myself because, I'm not worried about whether I catch up or not, but it's just being able to identify what I've lost and just kind of holding on to it and just going through my own pace.
Well, there's more and more Native people are getting longer-term recovery than we've ever had before and in larger numbers. But one of the things we're finding in a lot of communities we work in recovery, people are stuck. There's like a level you get to, and it's like, so? Like, what next? And I think we need to start sharing some of that new stuff everyone is working in. But once again, you think like you're the only one who has it.
That means a lot to me. But more importantly, I've been able to share that with other people, which is really exciting, and they understand.
Sure. Did we answer your question about women's behavior?
Well, I don't know, in my experience, when I reached that point where I'm supposed to have my turned off, and I stayed turned off for many years, and then I turned to alcohol.
Uh-huh.
And many of my sisters had babies. Mom was saying had babies at that time. You know, I had a clinic, and we wouldn't have babies. But for me, I don't recognize what I missed in that development. So I wouldn't even recognize if I were back English. Because maybe for men, getting up and partying and having sex and going to women is natural for them in that period. But for us to do that is aberrant behavior. Because 14 to 17, women shouldn't be doing that. So we aren't really going through our adolescence again when we're doing that. We're punishing ourselves.
Right.
So it is a totally different experience for us. But I don't know what that experience is. I don't know. Maybe you didn't have
Deborah?
Yeah.
I'd like to say something, but I don't want to insult someone in this room. I love my parents very much, but they're not all well. My father is an alcoholic, and my mom is an alcoholic as well. And their behavior at they're 50 and 70 years old is exactly like it was when they were teenagers. Yeah. He got the same haircut he had when he was a teenager. He got the same haircut he had when he was a teenager. Their bodies changed, but mentally and emotionally they have not changed. They had raised 11 children, and most of my brothers and sisters are either alcoholics or drug addicts and felons in prison. Throughout the whole time I was growing up, the same scenario played over and over again. You know, he would wave her arms and he would run away and they would get back together. But they were locked in this game with each other. And they're 60 and 70 years old and that game still takes place. And they can't see that they're locked in. They're not well, but they progressed physically. They got old physically. Their bodies are old. But their behavior is that of a teenager. And women behave that way just like men do. And I don't think necessarily that they see it, and I don't think necessarily that they do it intentionally. When we're in some of the communities, Indian communities all across the country, what I see is incredibly frustrating for somebody that's 16 or 17 years old. And I see those 15 and 17-year-olds trying to figure out what they're supposed to be as an adult, and what they're looking at or experiencing in the whole community is a bunch of teenagers in old bodies. And they're having a real hard time. They get real rebellious, and it must be scary. If I think about it, I had no idea. I don't know how to develop conflict. You pick or you run. You know, you are the aggressor or you run away. Those are the two choices. I'm 41 years old, and I'm figuring out now, you know, how you get to the other side of conflict. And there can be, everybody can have their own opinion and not be wrong. I'm just learning that. You don't understand that intimacy. And when you're 16 or 17, and you're starting to come into adulthood, how do you know what's an adult if you've never seen it or experienced it? You have no idea. And I don't know about you guys, but I have these aunts, and I love them dearly. And John has the same kind of aunts with that little curly hair on the top and his line straight and curly on the bottom. That's the style of the 50s, and it's dyed jet black. And it's like they've got stuff in that era. And I'm not saying this to insult them. I'm just saying I don't think they even see it. And it's like we can't get our children to that next stage if we don't grow up as adults. If we don't go back and repair that thing, our kids don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do it. It's our responsibility to show that.
You know, some of the lines of what you're talking about, like when I was growing up, you know, I'm 45 and I look around and I ask questions to other people my age. Well, I felt 45 when I was in the 5th grade. You know, I was ready to retire with all that responsibility that I had, you know, with a job, taking care of, you know, 7 sisters and 3 brothers. My dad always out looking for my mom, me taking care of my mother. You know, I was an old man. You know, when I got into junior high school, I was ready to go out and pasture. I really was, you know.
I was the hero too, my
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And you do that. And I was my mother's mother, and I was my father's mother, and I took care of everyone. And I'm not saying I'm anywhere near well. I'm saying I'm still learning to do. And for the girls in the family who saw the responsibility, it's time to lighten up and be a child or a child.
You see, that's one of the things I appreciate when I'm writing, is trying to lighten up. But the important thing to me is to be able to recognize a lot of things and accept them for what they are. But I was going to
All right, up front here.
From a woman's point of view, I knew exactly what he was talking about when he put his cigarettes in his sleeve. Actually, because I did that. And went to the party and said, jumped on the top table and said, I'm here. Well, I didn't hear that he went to the party chasing women or anything like that kind of thing. It was more of a personhood type thing, and identifying myself in some way and expecting you to recognize and accept me and involve in me out there. Sometimes if you don't recognize and say it's possible because these issues have to be resolved, trust and time and relationship. If you do not recognize it's like if you're upset and you can't relate to it, maybe you go back up and for it, that kind of thing. You know, maybe it's something else that's not resolved. But maybe I would think around the relationship issues, there's a lot of autonomy to be having your own body, being able to say, no, this is what this body can do, and not having recognition, and not being allowed to take that person away. That was just my thought recently.
I was talking to two elder yesterday, or day before yesterday, and I asked her, I says, what is shame? You know, looking at it from a culture point of view. And she sat there for a long time, and she come back and she says, shame is the deepest wound that a human being can experience. Shame is of all of them, that is the deepest one. And I just thought about that. Because that's a lot, you know, of what we have, many of us, how we have been raised. Those are the types of things we need to work in the recovery process, is to find a lot of that, because it's inside of ourselves. Go ahead.
Yeah, I knew exactly what you're talking about too, about, you know, when you're talking about the man and how he's dressed. I went through this, you know, in recovery I went through this. I'm not alcoholic, I'm an Al-Anon. But what I found myself doing in recovery after I'd been in a while was that I realized that I never honored my femininity. You know, it's like growing up as a teenager, I mean, I look nice, curl my hair, you know, do the makeup, but then always growing up with responsibility, I was also that 45-year-old woman.
Sure.
Which is exactly what my mother did. My mother, like, never went through adolescence. But, like, immediately she was this 45-year-old woman. Having had a child at 17, I was ready to be that 45-year-old woman. And so what ended up happening was that I gained a lot of weight, you know, 35, 40 pounds. No longer had that picture of femininity. You know, it was like I was just this big thing. No feminine, no masculine, just a being, you know, like, because I was afraid. I was afraid of being attractive, because what happens? What if you are? What if you have to deal with all the feelings and saying no, exactly what you were talking about. So what I ended up doing in recovery, once I lost some of that weight, was that I started to dress and to act inappropriately. You know, wearing clothes that didn't really, it looked great on a young teenager. I mean, how many times you walk down the street and you see, you know, women who are in their 40s or something, and it's like, you go, why is she dressed like that? You know, it's like, that doesn't look great on her teenage daughter. And I did all that stuff. I did that, trying to reclaim that part of me that I lost. When I'm a 40-year-old woman, you know, in a 12-year-old body.
Sure. Jerry?
I think, Jerry, I'm an alcoholic. There are a lot of things in here that are really good, and it's really important that we ask these questions, and also that we take back to people who sponsor some of the solutions that we hear in here. I believe a number of us, because we grew up in dysfunctional families, are stuck in the survival mode because that's how we grew up, and it's the only way we know. And so for me, getting into recovery and trying to do some of the recovery steps, I always go back to that. And a lot of times I catch myself doing it, not so it's even justified, it's just a snap reaction. And so for me, sharing with other alcoholics and being involved in something like this is really important because it gives me an opportunity to listen to other Indian people and how we survive in the world. You know, and actually after survival we come to live. And right at that point, I'm learning to trust. Just barely learning to trust. I'm 8 years sober, and I'm just now developing a sense of trust in non-Indian people. It's taken a long time, and I think that search for identity that comes with adolescence is something that I'm just not getting in touch with. And so it's important that as alcoholics we continue to work the steps of recovery, especially at the inventory. Because it's in the inventory, I believe, that we begin to find some of those issues that keep us from becoming the people we can be.
Okay. Thanks, Jerry.
I just had a question on that medicine wheel, that for the areas of development. It sounds or seems to me like when kids grew up in the 50s in BIA school, that it probably added to kind of fully developing. A lot of those people who were educated to do that, who are now parents or grandparents, and so that adds to something.
Well, one of the things is that you touched on is really critical for us to look at as Native people. In part of recovery, and we find in this is really critical for many of the tribes and us as individuals. And there was this one point, I was, when I come in a sober, I was very angry. I mean, almost violent. That's the only thing I knew. So anyway, as I worked through that, there was this one thing, there were certain things, if I would just hear about the story, like the walk of our people, or I would hear about other thing happens to other Indians, a long time ago, I get very rageful. I mean, just get really pissed about it. And I say, look, then was then, now is now. What's the matter with you? But one of the things like when we work in the communities that we find is very important for us to look at in recovery is this intergenerational healing. And that means this. When they started a long time ago, the boarding schools, some of the Indian schools, that was really initiated by the Department of War. And it was a strategy to assimilate Native people back into dominant culture. And that's documented. That's not like a secret. But when they grew up, and they, all the ways that they got the kids into the schools, the ones that they got in there, which was a large portion of the children then, but they were successful in that they taught them, hey, being Indian, don't speak your language, don't speak your culture, see, don't do no ceremonies, don't do this. And they grew up being quite successful, for the most part. Then what do you happen when those kids got married? And how did they raise their children? Hate being Indian, don't speak your language, the culture is bad. Then they have a grown up, and then they raise children. We work with youth right now that have not attended boarding school, and they have boarding school behavior. You can recognize it, the way that they talk. And the way that they are punished by their parents is the way boarding school was punished 3 and 4 generations ago. They make them kneel on things. They do the same thing to them. So sometimes today, we don't know why. I mean, there is some level sometimes that is just like, when I started going back to the culture, my mom was raised in boarding school. So I started to want to relearn the language and letting my hair grow long again. Made her mad. She said, why are you letting your hair grow like that? That's stupid. And don't be speaking that language around here. I don't want to be hearing that here. And I started to see that I grew up that way. There were some things happening in boarding school directly affects us even as recovery people. I talked to an elder in our, because I've been interested in this boarding schools, and I'm starting to understand I have boarding school behavior in part of my recovery. I have to look at, I'm not trying to blame anyone. See, I'm fully accountable for my growth. It doesn't matter, my uncle molested me, that happens, but I'm accountable to change myself because I want to be happy. But I talked to this elder, he said, he's an uncle of mine. But he said we went to mission school. First day they got there at night and they put them all, in class, to bed and everything. But they brought them over the next morning, and the priest brought them into the school, and he said, I want to have a talk with you all about your behavior and about how I want you to mind me. So he talked to them, the elder said, and he took them downstairs, they have a furnace there. And he talked to them about doing exactly what he said. He didn't want to be, But then what he did was he had all his kids line in front of this furnace, and he reached in this box. He took a lid off that box. He pulled out a cat, and he opened up that door, and he just threw that cat in the furnace alive and shut that door. And this elder, he's like 87, just broke down and cried. That type of hurt. A lot of us are raised by people have experienced many, many things like that. And when we look at getting in recovery, where do we get stuck? That's the things we got to start looking at. When they start to surface, to understand there's other things intergenerationally that has affected us. There was a lot of sexual molestation went on in the boarding schools. Nobody wants to say that. But sometimes we're working with some elders, they'll tell you what went on there, and it wasn't pleasant. There was people, women, we know some, is early 40s, younger than me, that were sterilized when they were in boarding school, with no medicine, no nothing. They held them down on tables. That went on. That wasn't like in the 1800s. They're now healing and processing that kind of stuff. So I think part of recovery is to look at intergenerational stuff also, because many of us it's like I started to understand why my parents were like they were. It was just all of a sudden my relationship with them changed, because I didn't know. It was like you don't know what you don't know. I said, how could an Indian parent tell their children to don't be Indian, don't be speaking your language, don't go back to the culture, it's bad, leave it alone, don't go that. Now I understand. Before, I couldn't understand. Does that make sense? And those are the things like when we are in recovery a longer periods, we need to start even looking at that and see what is that effects on us. Because even some of the children now, that's still happening today in many other schools. How many here was to boarding school, just out of curiosity? See, quite a few. All right.
I heard you say something about that cycle of trust. I'm in a confusing area right now. I'm a single parent. I've had my kid ever since he's 3 days old on my own. And I'm doing the best I can to raise him. And coming from an alcoholic family, and my father in recovery, and I think it made it work. It makes sense what you said about different things that made my father in one area and I'm in another. When we connect, we explode, And I see myself taking those same things home with me when I go home. And I see myself reacting to my kids sometimes like that. Sometimes it's kind of hard to I heard what Al was saying about trust. And it's like, how do you, I'm confused about what you're supposed to do when you're telling something and then you can't do it because you have other responsibilities. I mean, it's like, clean my own house, my own laundry, and he's a very big house, and then tell him, well, we'll go ride bikes, and then,
Well, when we get into steps this afternoon, into the workshops, we'll be looking at a lot of that. Because I think when you start to look at understanding the interconnectedness and a lot of the thing about the steps, I think that a person has the ability to really look forward to the steps as an interconnected system that allows each individual to really accelerate growth. It isn't about wallowing in it forever. And it's about learning, where to focus. It's sort of like you can't fix that which you don't know is broke. And very often we focus so much on a couple of things we think we're all screwed up. It's like your car doesn't run, you take it to the garage, you say, your car's all messed up, it's all broke, God, it's going to cost me millions to do it. You take it there, first thing that has to be done is to identify where it's broke. Carburetor needs to be adjusted, brakes need to be fixed, you got a flat tire. We do those three things, it can start running. But we say, everything's broke. But we're not as broke as we would like to think that we are. But it's a matter of locating that right place. And then learning to use tools on focus. And to live a balanced life. The Creator made a harmonious system because we were alcoholics, whatever, went out and did some stuff. It doesn't mean I have to wait for 15 years before I can have a harmonious life. It's to the degree that I come back and work with the principal laws and values, and then it starts to happen. Right? So we'll take a look at that part of the steps this afternoon on how to identify things quickly and make adjustments and not tear ourselves up in the process of recovering.
I think one of the most important things that Paul will go through is understand, like a key issue right now. He's able to identify if there's something that's possibly wrong, and he's able to dialogue it and willing to do something about it. Like even for myself, being in recovery, like I enjoy being a parent, and I want to always be a good parent. And whenever I see anything free or parenting classes, I go, and I learn. And then I take it, and I try it out, and it doesn't work, and I look for another way. Or ask a friend of mine. But, it works. But I think he's on the right track because he's just able to identify it right now. And it sounds to me like he's willing to work on it. He talks about it.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the best thing I would have done was I got involved in alchemy, and that's where I learned what corporate and normal was, what I should have felt. For me, it just the lesson first was not playing thanks to God every day. And then about a year later, getting into adult children's alcoholics and studying that and all that. And 5 years ago, on October 11th, I woke up to a new world. I was raised in the woods in Missouri, and I was living in the woods in the and I've never seen a tree before. There was no records, no music, no tapes, not one person, nothing. So I heard familiar to 22 others. But I had Al-Anon for support, and it for a fourth and fifth step twice in 2 years. I got to the first person, and then I got when I got into alcohol, by all those kids, none of them were kids. Like I had brain infection first from my dad, and then my granddad did later in the military. And then I got beat to the horn, so I felt his work for it. He had full strength, and my dad was stronger than I was. And he never ever hit me again. I was out for a long time that time. But it's been hell. But the kids, they taught me. I needed to learn what a kid 4, 5, 7 needs to know. And I learned it from them.
Mm-hmm.
All the kids knew more than I did. Thanks.
Okay. Looking at these developmental stages, they trigger a lot of good things. But we're really just trying to set up to do that. This afternoon we'll learn mind mapping, how to trigger more. We're going to workshop in groups, capitalizing one another's experiences where that's appropriate for us to share something. But we'd like to finish these stages because I think they are very, very important yet. When we get to our age of our late teens, like 19, 20, that's the first time that it's sort of like it's at that point we can walk off the stage of life. Like pretty much it's like all before then we've been acting, trying to figure all this stuff out. But once we get our identity, we know why we are, who we are, and where we're going. It's like you can get off that stage finally, like when you're 20, and you say like, I now know who I am, I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses, I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses, and if you don't like it, stuff it. Right? It's like you get off that stage of life. You're just not around like people pleasing. But then next we will go to this stage of intimacy, and that still happens between maybe the 20s to 30s or so. And it's at that age the human being needs to develop the ability to share their feelings. It's about building relationships. I need to be able to tell you my opinion whether you agree with me or not. See, I need to be able to share that. Now you see like college students, you ever notice they'll sit in a student union, whatever, they just talk, and they come home from school and they have opinions on everything. They know the government should run, this is screwed up, that's bad, tribal councils like this, geez, who hired that one, look at that jerk. And they just have opinions on everything, when they're in that. Now you'll see them even talking to one another. You see one talking, the other one's listening. You ever notice that other one's not listening? They're thinking the up-one'smanship story, just waiting for them to get done. See, then they go back and they, you think your mother was bad? Let me tell you about my mother, how bad she was, see? So they start to switch stories back and forth. Now you see, these things are like building. So let's just say that I am in this age of, or as a human being in relationships. Do you think I have the ability to be intimate in relationships if I don't know who I am? Do you think I have the ability to be effective in relationships if I cannot trust? Do you think I have the ability to be intimate in relationships if I don't have these feelings about myself? I'm good at something, I'm good for something feelings? See, but I have the ability to come back in areas where I'm off, I can rebuild myself. So a lot of times if I have issues in relationships, I got to take a look at the steps. There's other key things I need to notice. When I look at unmanageability, or I'm writing inventory, I'm looking for these patterns. I need to be able to see these patterns, you see where I'm off track. Then knowing and working step 10 and 11 is where I go and rebuild myself back so I get that right away. We don't need to wallow in it forever. Because very often, if we don't know these things, so if I have issues in relationships, the relationship is not the issue. There's something I need to look at inside of myself. So how do I go find that so I can change that? So as I come back and I can discover what that is, then you'll see relationships will improve. But when I get through this intimacy, then I go to this age of generativity. And this might be, 40 to 50s. And the generativity is then the need for the human being to do something for others. I have to be a giving person. You see, a lot of people will just be involved in volunteer work, and they do all sorts of stuff just free. In other words, they do it not for credit or glory or to get something back. They just do it because they have to do it. It just makes them feel good. So you see, a lot of times it's at that point where prior to that we're takers, but we'll get to that age of generativity, then all of a sudden we got to go and do something for some. You just got to do it, see, in order to be happy. Then we enter that age of the elders, the stage of integrity. That stage of integrity of the elders, that's at that point, if you ever watch elders that have integrity, see, they just kind of see a worthwhileness to all things. When you go there, you're like a mouse just wound up on this little thing, and they just sit there and they just kind of see it all connected, even the conflict. Right? They just see a worthwhileness to all things. Usually when you have integrity, or you're at that stage of the elder, by then you have developed your own set of codes by which you live your life. Like when we're younger, a lot of times, you ever notice, if you're honest, the real reason we don't do things is because I might get caught, and that's the reason I don't do them. Right? If I knew I wouldn't get caught, I'd give it a go. But I better not because I might get caught. But see, the elders, they've gotten past that. They just do it because it's not right for them. They seem to have a a philosophy that it's okay to be who you are. You don't have to be like how they think to be okay. It's okay to be young. It's okay to be a breed. It's okay to be white and this. It's okay to, right? It's okay to be man. It's okay to be work. It's okay not to work. You don't see them, well, what is your amount of blood? You know, you are traditional, or you are urban one that you don't know nothing about here. You know, they don't spend this time getting things in buckets and categories and all that. It's okay. If you're Indian this much, you're Indian. And you're all right. You don't see them getting all hung up, you see, like we are sometimes. So I thought I would do is just kind of share that, those developmental stages before we take a look at the steps, so we have a form of reference that when we start to look at unmanageability and we start to look at those, that we're looking at the Creator did make a path for the human being to grow mentally healthy. Many of us did not have the opportunity to do that. So it's not mom's fault, it's not dad's fault, it's not the way I was born's fault. Right? The issue is I am accountable to correct my life. It doesn't matter who did it. And later on this afternoon we'll also talk about the ability to forgive the unforgivable. But there's certain things sometimes that we need to do if I want to have the style of life that sobriety has to offer. Sobriety is just not about not drinking. It's about another whole style of us coming back to all those things that is available to us in our culture. And it's about living. So we'll talk about those things. Did everyone get those lights? Because you see, if we take a look at, very often when we are measuring things, we're always looking at results. You ever ask yourself, where do results come from? Every result will be preceded by an action. Cannot be no other way. The Creator made everything to run by a system of laws. So then you say, well, where do actions come from? You ever notice? You got to think them. They don't just magically appear. So if I think a certain thing, it causes the action, shows the result in my life. Well, where does thinking come from? Well, it comes from here, the human being. Basically, the human being is 98% of everything that we do is run by 8 thought patterns. It's not like it's all as complicated as we think. There's just thought patterns we do and we just repeat them. Then we say, what is it that drives the being? It's our will, our free will. The Creator designed us to function from free will. And what is it drives our will? Our spirit and intent. So we want to change the results. See, there's this definition of insanity. It says you can't keep thinking what you're thinking and doing what you're doing and expect different results. Right? If you want different results, there's something that has to change that result. And that's how we'll be looking at the steps from an Indian point of view. All right. Any comments? All right. So when we come back from our lunch, we're going to take this and apply it to the 12 steps to see how does all these concepts fit into the 12 steps. So we are starting at let's start at 1:02. 2 minutes after 1. 2 minutes after 1. 1:02. We'll start. Go on to the next step. And I think there was one important thing, I guess my own experience when I first got into looking at doing the steps, and I talked to a sponsor about that, was remember in this one diagram here we talked about that flow of results. And what it says there basically is that the human being, it never does anything unless the will says it's okay. So everything always has to pass through the will. I will do this or I will not do this. Then, depending upon which way I go, then the results go. And the reason for that is that the Creator designed us to function from free will. And that if we do anything other than a free will, then we are designed to push back or not do it. So if I could just pick on you, if I have you put your hand on mine, if you would. If you notice, as soon as I push without saying a word, it pushes back. But if I ask, could I push your hand, then you get cooperation. Now that's physically. We are designed that anytime anyone pushes us, we push back. Well, it's also designed, we are designed mentally to push back anytime something is against our will. You're supposed to. The true motivation to get the full force, the first full motivation, is always when we do something on a want to, choose to, like it, love it. I want to do that. See? I choose to do the steps. I love to do them. I want to walk the red road. But as soon as the mind hears I have to, it has a little mechanism that wakes up and says, oh, no, you don't. I'll get you out of it. So it very creatively kicks in a system to have you go do something else. You get procrastination. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. See, so this voice, in a sense, this force starts to kick in to get us to not do it. So we always function at that level of the free will. So what I'm saying there is that really applies a lot when you come to working steps. Why are you working steps? Well, I have to so I don't get drunk. Not. See, that little voice wakes us and says, no, you don't. See, I'll get you out of it. So what we're saying is, if you're telling yourself you have to work the steps because my sponsor says I have to, that little thing wakes up and says, I'll get you out of it. So it starts all these little plans to divert you to do something else. Now, there are no have-tos in the whole world except one. See? You don't have to work steps to stay sober. There are thousands of people in AA staying sober and they never worked a lick of steps in their life. Now, they're miserable as shit. Now, that's true. You see, the only catcher is you make the choice, you have to take the consequence. So, like getting sober or whatever, it's sort of like a banquet. On that banquet, as many things are available. Steak, lobster, buffalo T-bone, whatever. But then it works its way down to meatloaf and to cheeseburgers, and on this end, peanut butter. So if you want peanut butter sobriety, see, then you don't get steak by not working steps. You can get peanut butter sobriety, but the only problem with that is that peanut butter always sticks to the roof of your mouth, you know. Love my sobriety. Okay. So what I'm saying is, in looking at the steps, if you were saying you have to do it, don't do it because you won't anyway. Right? Not only you, but you have a mental resistance because we're only designed to function from free will. So the only catcher is there are no have-tos really in the whole world except one, is we have to die. But pretty much everything else is a matter of choice. You don't have to pay taxes. Don't pay them. Now there's a catcher. There's always a consequence for every choice. You don't pay taxes, you end up in jail. Well, that's true. But you do not have to pay taxes. Now you get in jail, you can get out of jail in one day, or maybe two at the most. If you're in jail, you want to get out, hang yourself. You'd be out in a pine box. That's true. But I don't want to die. Well then, shut up and pay your taxes. See, but do it on a want to, choose to, like it, love it. So I think it's important for a person to think just a little bit about that in terms of steps. You do not have to work steps to stay sober. Honest to God, you don't. Don't do it. But there's a consequence for that. But if you want to be free, want the freedom, you want the promises, you want whatever that is, then steps will get you that. So if you want that, then do it on a want to, choose to, like it, love it. Not because you have to, because you don't. A lot of people stay sober and never work steps. But they never taste the honey either. Right? So this is about tasting the honey of life. So I think it's very, very important to take a look at deciding. See, what works in the decisions is I choose to do this. I want to do this. So then you align all the powers of will, and you don't have that little resistance thing. You know, if you ever notice when you tell yourself you have to do something, you ever notice that you very creatively go do something else and say, geez, I intended to do that. I have to do this today or else. And then it seems like we never end up doing it. So I think it's important to come to terms with that. You're going to work the steps, do them because you want to. Because you really won't anyway. If you tell yourself you have to do them, you won't. My sponsor made me. No. That's just like pride talk. We talk, why my sponsor made me do this. No, they don't. We are fully accountable for this, ourselves. So I think it's important when we take a look at steps to align our will. See, that we do it because we want to do it, because you don't have to. But then there's consequences for those choices. So what we want to do next is we want to take a look at this interconnectedness of the steps. And so what we're going to do is just an overview. Remember we talked this morning, it's about harmony, balance, it's interconnected. Everything is interconnected to each other. Spirit and intent, two roads, the red road, the other road. So we want to take a look at the interconnectedness of steps to see if they make sense. Because the steps is not like they're not designed for fear. They're not a fear-motivated process or something else. So we just want to take an overview look at the steps. Then that person can decide, is this something I want to do? Because who would want to do something if you don't know what the outcome is going to be? Now, the big book, it talks about some outcomes. It says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, remember, well, that's talking about the odds. So it doesn't say, maybe I'll have one, or kind of possibly it might. It pretty much states it will happen. It's like a law. You work the steps, you get the result. So if you're on a spiritual awakening, do them. If you don't want one, then don't do it. But maybe you can get it another way. See? And then it talks about rarely have we seen a person fail. Now, what are those odds? 50-50? 80-20? What? Like, rarely have we seen a person fail? But it doesn't say to do it any way you want either. It says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly done it this way. So the steps, it's about a precision way of doing it. Very, very precise, because we'll see, the steps is about an implementation of laws from an unseen world, about these principles that it talks about. So as we take a look at these steps, we're going to just kind of make them like a building block to show how they all interconnect. So in step 1, there is 2 parts for this step. But every one of the steps, it also has, each of the steps, it has a principle. One of these principles that it's talking about. So as we do these, it says in step 1 that principle is the honesty. That's what that step is about honesty. So there's 2 parts to that step. The first part is to admit we're powerless over alcohol. Then the second part is to admit our lives are unmanageable. So you see, the thing about admission is the key to power. You know, there's this line, it says, like, let go. As soon as you do, is let God. Right? Surrender, as soon as you do, to win. So it's that admitting of that is what transitions us into that place of that power, that thing we're looking for. So in the first half, we need to look at the powerlessness over alcohol. Now in this workbook on page 11, there are guidelines as to where in the big book are the instructions for each part of those steps. That's where the instructions are. So what we're going to do is just look at an overview of these steps. So we look at powerlessness over alcohol in the first one. And then in the second half of the first step, there are 9 areas to look at in terms of unmanageability. Personal relationships, emotional nature, full of fear. So there's 9 specific areas to look at in those steps. That's one of the workshops we're going to do, is to practice looking at those 9 areas. All we want to say right now is there are 9 areas. Then when we take and look at step 2, that principle is hope. So there's 9 areas of information that we look at in step 1. We bring that information to step 2. So we connect from step 1 to step 2, those 9 areas. Then that step, it says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So what we do in step 2 is we look at the unmanageability, and in step 2 it's came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could. So one of the things we'll do in step 2 is we will create a vision in 9 areas of our lives. So we bring, if I take a look at in step 1, say for example, the personal relationships, and I'm able to see where they're broke, then I bring that to step 2, then I ask myself this question: we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could. Well, what would this relationship look like if it worked? So I'm always asking myself this question: is there a power that exists that could make my relationship successful? See, if you take a look at the word sanity in a dictionary, it means having a sound mind, soundness of mind. So I see where the relationship is broke in step 1. In step 2, I take a look at, well, what would it look like if it was working? How would I have me be in it? No matter what that relationship did, how would I have me be? So we create a vision in step 2. And then the question is am I willing to believe that there's a power could make that happen? Now, or am I remotely willing to believe that there's a power that could make that happen? Am I kind of willing to possibly believe that maybe 1,000,000 divided by 10, there's 1/000th of an ounce? Am I willing to believe? Any of those are more than enough to make it work. So what I end up doing in step 2 is setting a vision in 9 areas of my life. Personal relationships. So the question when we do step 2 is not how is this power going to do it, or when is this power going to do it, but is there a power? Am I willing to believe that there's a power that will do that? So we create a vision in 9 areas of our life. Now if we just momentarily go up and look at step 12, it says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. The vision that you set in step 2 is the spiritual awakening that you get in step 12. And that's all you get, no more and no less, for that pass through the steps. So once you set the vision, then these steps remove the obstacles that block. And when the obstacles are removed, you get that vision. So that vision that's set in step 2 is the spiritual awakening in step 12. If that makes any sense. Then once we do that, we'll go to step 3, for which that principle is faith. Now, I used to wonder sometimes about, made a decision to turn my life and my will over the care of the Creator, God. Then I would say, why would I want to turn this will thing over anyway? And where is it? And why is it such a big deal to turn that will over? Because you see, from step 3 through step 11, all of that work is done on the will. That's where the work is it's done. It's not done on my brain, my mind, and all that stuff. It's done on the will. So let's just say that I could draw the will in a box. And in this will, there would be certain things that I do. I could be dishonest, I could be selfish, but there's certain things that's in my will. Now, if we had, say, a mountain, and on this mountain there was say this was a lake, had water in it, and then say down the mountain I lived in this house, and that I would have, say, a river would come out of that lake, and I would take a little pipe out of that river, and I would run that into my house, and that's where I get my drinking water. So if that water tastes like crap, is there anything wrong with the faucet? Is there anything wrong with the river? So what I need to do is, if it tastes funny, I need to go back to where is it causing that to taste funny. So if the results in my life are not right, then I need to trace that back. So the relationships between the lake, so the lake is the will, the river, the water I'm tasting is the result. So if I want to change the results of my life, then it might be to my advantage to turn the lake over to the Creator. As it is, with all the junk, everything, exactly how it is. So in step 3, it's just taking it as it is, not cleaning it up. You see, now, very often we confuse this turning the will over with our feelings. So we go through this thing, we turn it over one day, and then we say to the next day, well, I took it back. Then I turned it over, and then I took it back. I turned it over, took it back, turned it over, took it back. See? What a day. Turning this will over and taking it back. But you see, when you take that third step, it isn't that way. Once you turn your life over to the Creator. Now, the best way I've heard it said is this guy one time in AA, he told me this story about, he said, he's talking about step 3. And he said there was these 4 frogs sitting on a log one day. So one of those frogs made a decision to jump in the water. Then he said to me, he said, now how many frogs is on that log? I said, well, there's 3. He said, no, there's 4. One of those frogs just decided to jump in the water. But he said the difference is, he said, when you turn your life over the care of the Creator, then He will, like that frog, once you decide, then He makes that frog a different color. He makes that frog orange. So when that frog decides to jump in the water, or we decide to turn our will over, the Creator makes you an orange frog. You will never be a green frog again. So what happens if you get pissed the next day? You're a pissed off orange frog. See, after you take that step. What happens if you get angry? You are an angry orange frog. Once you cut the deal with a Creator, then you can't say, well, make me green. Well, I'm going to be orange. Well, I'm going to be green. No, whatever it is after that, you are orange. So you go drink again. You're a drunk orange frog. You cannot go back and forth. So we got to understand that that is a decision. That decision is of the will. That I take that will and I turn it over to the care of the Creator. So we take this will like it is and we shift it to the care of God. So once we are able to do that, then we come to the 4th step. And what the 4th step is a way to do an examination on the will. So we keep continuing to experience another principle. So in this 4th step, there is 3 parts to this inventory. There's a resentment inventory, a fear inventory, and a sex inventory. The resentment inventory is done in 5 columns. So you put the name of the person with whom you have the resentment against. Second column, you put what they did. The 3rd column is where you actually you put in the 3rd column 1 or more of up to 7 things. This is where you inventory the ego. The ego masks are revealed. The fourth column in the resentment inventory is where you come out with a list of character defects. You actually get the name. You get the name of the flaw that's in the will. So you end up with a list of those defects. Then the fifth column is you get the names of the person to whom you owe amends. That happens in the resentment inventory. Then the fear inventory is done in 4 columns. The first column is the name of the fear, why do I have it, did self-reliance fail, and what should I have done instead. Then the sex inventory is done in either 7 columns or 9 columns, depending upon how sexually active one is. If there hasn't been that much happening, 7 column works pretty good. If you've been tearing it up, then 9 columns seems to be better to do because you can see the patterns. Because in the inventory you want to be able to see the patterns. Then in the 6th column of the sex inventory is where you come out with a list of the names in that area of amends, that you make amends. Then we take that inventory when we are done and we do that 5th step. We admit to ourselves, to the Creator, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Then when that is done, we do steps 6 and 7. 6 and 7, the information for steps 6 and 7 comes out of the inventory. So in the 4th column of the resentment inventory is the list of defects that you take to steps 6 and 7. The 5th column of the inventory is the list of names that you take to steps 8 and 9. Right? This is all linked together. It's interconnected to one another. Now, all of this work is always done. See, the steps are, after step 3, the steps are all done on the ego. They are not done on, you know how you say, like sometimes you write inventory, you say, well, you got to write the truth about yourself. You're really not writing the truth about yourself. You're writing about the lie about yourself. You know the saying says, the truth shall set you free. Well, if what you are writing about doesn't make you feel free, then you must be writing on something other than the truth. Whatever it is you're writing, it's not the truth. You're writing about the lie. Does that make sense? Is this? So you're writing really all on ego. It is all ego information that you're writing on. So as you progress up through these steps, another way to look at it is you kind of go through a tunnel in this sense. You work steps 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. And when you do steps 6 and 7, where you ask the Creator to remove the defective character, and you're willing to have Him do so, it is at that point that a transformation takes place in the will. So let's say that I discover in the inventory that I have a lot of selfishness in the will. And in a way, what this whole process on the will looks like, you ever remember a long time ago they have this style where you'd buy these coffee tables and you could put pictures on them and you could paint that plastic on there so you could see the pictures but you couldn't get to them? That's kind of the way the will is. At first some stuff gets in there and then you can't get at it, so you're just that way no matter like what you do. But then you take that will and you turn it over. In other words, you change those pictures. Whatever that is. You can have the Creator do it. So the first thing happens in the inventory is I start to identify what those particular instances are in the will. When I do a 5th step, that would be like going to that table with a big chisel and chipping off that plastic coat that won't let you get to it. That's what the 5th step does. It makes it available. So 5th step, it removes the plastic, but the pictures are still there. When I do steps 6 and 7, once I see like I'm selfish or judgmental or I lied, when I become willing to have the Creator So my job is to not remove it. My job is to be willing to have Him do it. So if I say I'm willing to have Him remove my selfishness, then He takes that away. Remember, it's a polarity system. What do you think He will put back in my will? Pardon? Probably. So if I'm dishonest, if I'm irresponsible, so what happens is He starts to put those principles from the red road back into my will. Now, have you ever noticed, for those of you who have worked steps 6 and 7, you ever notice right after you do it, everything turns to shit? Huh? So what you say is, it didn't work. Well, when it turns to crap, it means it did work. Because you see, when I go through that tunnel of steps 6 and 7, when I come out of it, I come out with a will change. In other words, what happens is, my will is changed, but my head's got the old stuff in it yet. So a conflict occurs. So the concept is, conflict precedes clarity. When I have alignment to the will, when my will says, I choose to be an asshole, and my head says, you are one, I have no conflict. Isn't that right? But when the will changes, now all of a sudden I'm in conflict because my head doesn't know that yet the Creator made a change. So it always seems to be worse. But it's not worse. I mean, it is worse, but that's healthy. It says now the will is going to start to drive the change. Because now I'm trying to figure out, who am I now? Because I don't know who I am, and I won't start to see that until after I start to get that feedback, that conflict occurs. So I step 6 and 7, it seems to be worse. Then it gets better. That's because of that tunnel that we go through. So the will is transformed right here. Now very often we really struggle in steps 6 and 7. You see, there's a story, it says about this person is baking a cake. So they get all the flour and sugar and all that, and they put it in this pan, turn on the stove, get it to 350, get that stove all heated up, and they pour that batter into this pan, smooth it out with a spatula or whatever. They take it to the stove, open up the door, they